You spent 12 years in a classroom being handed science that was actually marketing, panic, and expired guesswork. Here are 42 lies your teacher graded you on. 1. You have probably heard it framed as inspiration. You're only using 10% of your brain, so imagine what you could accomplish if you unlock the rest. It sounds motivational. It is also complete nonsense, and not the harmless kind. Brain imaging technology, including functional MRI and PET scans, shows activity distributed across virtually all brain regions, even during sleep. Your brain accounts for roughly 2% of your body weight, but burns through approximately 20% of your total energy supply. Evolution is ruthless about cutting costs. It does not maintain expensive metabolically demanding tissue that is sitting idle. If 90% of your brain were unused, head injuries would be statistically harmless 90% of the time, which is obviously not what happens. Damage to virtually any region produces measurable, specific deficits. The quote is frequently attributed to Einstein, but no verified source for that attribution exists anywhere. The myth likely grew from early misreadings of neuroscience research, distinguishing glial cells from neurons. Your brain is not a locked mansion with 9 empty rooms waiting for the right motivational poster to open them. Every room is running, all the time, just keeping you functional. The 10% figure was never science. It was a productivity slogan wearing a lab coat. 2. Veins look blue through your skin, so the blood inside them must be blue. A satisfying, color-coded answer that health class delivered with complete conviction and zero follow-up. Human blood is never blue, not when it is deoxygenated, not in the deepest vein, not for a single second inside a living body. Blood is red because of hemoglobin, an iron-containing protein that binds oxygen. Oxygenated blood is bright red. Deoxygenated blood returning to the heart is a darker, deeper red. Not blue, not purple, just a richer shade of the same color. The reason veins appear blue or greenish through skin is entirely optical. Different wavelengths of light penetrate tissue at different depths. Blue light scatters near the surface and reflects back to your eyes, while red light penetrates deeper and gets absorbed. You are seeing a trick of physics, not the actual color of the blood. The only animals with genuinely blue blood are horseshoe crabs and certain mollusks, which use a copper-based molecule called hemocyanin instead of iron-based hemoglobin. That textbook diagram using blue for veins and red for arteries was a teaching convenience that calcified into biological fact in the minds of an entire generation. You were looking at your own arm and being told it was deceiving you. It was not. The diagram was the problem. 3. The belief that sugar turns children into wall-climbing chaos agents is one of the most durable convictions in parenting history. Every birthday party chaperone, every classroom teacher, every relative who watched a child sprint in circles after cake treats this as settled biology. It is not. Controlled scientific studies have repeatedly found that sugar has no measurable effect on children's behavior or activity levels. A landmark meta-analysis published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1995 reviewed 23 double-blind controlled trials and found zero evidence that sugar affects behavior or cognitive performance in children. The more revealing finding came from studies where parents were falsely told their child had consumed sugar when they had not. Those parents consistently rated their children as significantly more hyperactive, demonstrating that the entire effect lives in adult expectation, not in the child's bloodstream. The myth gained cultural traction in the 1970s through the Feingold diet, which blamed food additives and sugar for hyperactivity, a framework that was never scientifically validated. The actual cause of post-party chaos is the environment: excitement, social stimulation, disrupted sleep schedules, and a room full of other children doing the same thing. You spent decades policing the punch bowl at children's parties for a crime sugar did not commit. The real culprits were a bouncy castle and 45 minutes past bedtime. 8 glasses of water, 8 ounces each, every single day. Miss one and your organs begin their slow, dusty collapse into dehydration. Health class treated this like a biological commandment handed down from an actual laboratory. The specific number has no scientific foundation, and traces back to a misquoted non-recommendation from 1945. A United States Food and Nutrition Board recommendation from that year stated that people needed roughly 2.5 liters of water daily, which sounds like the origin of the rule. The very next sentence clarified that most of that quantity is contained in prepared foods, a sentence that was universally ignored for the next 80 years. Hydration needs vary enormously based on body size, activity level, climate, ambient temperature, and dietary composition. A single universal number applied to all humans, regardless of any of those variables, is physiologically absurd. Fruits, vegetables, soups, coffee, and tea all contribute meaningfully to daily fluid intake. Depending on diet quality, up to 20% of daily hydration comes from food alone. The human body also has an extremely precise built-in hydration monitoring system that predates the 8-glass rule by several million years. It is called thirst. Your body built a perfect alert system, and your health teacher told you to ignore it and follow a number a committee invented before the polio vaccine existed. 5. The tongue map. Sweet at the tip, salty on the sides, bitter at the back, sour somewhere in the middle, was printed in health textbooks, drawn on worksheets, and tested on exams for decades. It is completely wrong. Every taste can be detected by taste receptors distributed across the entire tongue surface, not confined to regional zones. The myth originated from a flawed 1901 German research paper by a scientist named Hannig, which identified only subtle variations in regional sensitivity. A later researcher dramatically exaggerated those variations into a diagram that became the global classroom standard and was then copied, photocopied, and recopied until the exaggeration became the fact. Taste buds do not exist only on the tongue. They are also present on the soft palate, the throat, and the epiglottis. Meanwhile, a fifth primary taste category, umami, the savory quality found in aged cheeses and fermented foods, was identified by a Japanese chemist in 1908 and was not widely accepted by Western science until the early 2000s. The wrong map was still being taught in classrooms while the scientific community was finalizing the existence of an entirely separate taste the diagram never included. Your tongue never read the map. It just kept doing whatever it wanted, which is why you can taste bitterness on the tip and sweetness at the back every single time you eat. 6. Every winter came the same warning. Go outside without a hat and you will lose the majority of your body heat through your head. Hat equals survival. No hat equals the beginning of hypothermia. The head loses heat in exact proportion to its surface area, which is roughly 10% of total body surface. It is not a special heat leak portal or a thermal chimney sitting on top of your shoulders. The myth most likely traces back to a 1950s United States military survival field manual based on experiments where subjects wore fully insulated Arctic suits with their heads as the only exposed body part. Of course, the head lost the most heat in that experiment. It was the only thing exposed. By identical logic, if only your hands were uncovered, hands would lose most of the heat and no one would be writing health class curriculum about mandatory gloves. The head does have slightly higher vascular density than some other body regions, making heat loss marginally more noticeable, but not disproportionately serious or uniquely dangerous. This specific myth was formally addressed and corrected in the British Medical Journal and in multiple peer-reviewed sources, yet survived in school health curriculum for decades afterward. Cover any exposed skin in the cold and you will be fine. The hat is not magic. It is just a hat, doing what hats do, which is cover a surface area that is cold. 7. Sit too close to the television and you will need thick glasses before you finish elementary school. Every parent enforced the 2-meter rule with the certainty of a public health official. There is no scientific evidence that viewing distance from a screen causes permanent eye damage in otherwise healthy eyes. The original concern had a real but extremely specific origin. In 1967, General Electric recalled color television sets that were emitting excessive X-ray radiation due to a manufacturing defect, a genuine product safety issue, but one limited to a specific product line that was recalled and corrected. That single product crisis became a universal biological law applied to every screen, every distance, and every eye for the next 6 decades. Children who habitually sit very close to screens are far more likely doing so because they are already nearsighted and struggling to see from a normal distance. The myopia causes the behavior, not the other way around. The American Academy of Ophthalmology states clearly that screens cause no structural eye damage. Extended close viewing causes temporary eye strain and fatigue, which resolves with rest, the same way your legs feel tired after standing for a long time. The entire rule was reverse engineered from a faulty appliance from 1967 that no longer exists and was never representative of how screens work. 60 years of sit-back warnings built on a recalled product. 8. The flashlight under the blanket crime. Every child who read after lights out got the same verdict. Keep doing that, and you will be wearing thick glasses by age 10, guaranteed. Reading in low light causes absolutely no structural damage to the eyes. The ophthalmology community is unified on this point. Reading in dim conditions causes the ciliary muscles of the eye to work harder to maintain focus, which produces temporary eye strain, headaches, and fatigue, symptoms that fully resolve with rest. No peer-reviewed study has ever demonstrated a causal link between low-light reading and the development or worsening of myopia. The myth may have originated in the pre-electricity era when candle and gas lamp reading was genuinely uncomfortable due to flickering, inconsistent, dim light. A real discomfort that was then mischaracterized as physical damage rather than temporary strain. The actual risk factors for myopia development include genetic predisposition and, in a finding that nobody puts in health class, insufficient time spent outdoors during childhood. Natural light exposure appears to play a role in normal eye development. The books were never the danger. Generations of children were caught with contraband flashlights under contraband blankets for doing something that cannot physically harm them. The rule existed because someone was annoyed by the behavior and needed a medical-sounding reason to stop it. 9. A claim spread from a single paper and reshaped global public health discourse, parenting culture, vaccine policy, and the medical trust of an entire generation. The supposed link between childhood vaccines and autism is one of the most damaging myths in modern medicine, and it was manufactured from fraudulent data. The original 1998 paper published in a major British medical journal involved only 12 children use manipulated data and was funded by a law firm actively pursuing litigation against vaccine manufacturers. A catastrophic conflict of interest, the paper concealed entirely. The lead author lost his medical license. The paper was formally retracted. A Danish cohort study published in 2019 followed over 650,000 children and found no association between the MMR vaccine and autism under any measured condition. The timing confusion is genuinely understandable. Autism symptoms often become noticeable around 12 to 18 months of age, the same period children receive several routine vaccines. Coincidental timing was systematically mistaken for causation. The CDC, the World Health Organization, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the independent health authorities of every developed country have reviewed the evidence and reached the same conclusion independently. A fraudulent study written to support a lawsuit was treated as a scientific revelation. The paper was retracted. The fear it generated kept running long after the author was gone. 10. Eat a single chip at noon and you are banned from the pool until 12:30 minimum. Breaking the rule invites cramps, drowning, and the full force of parental judgment. The 30-minute waiting rule has no scientific or medical basis, and the American Red Cross removed it from their guidelines. The theory is that blood diverted to the digestive system after eating causes muscles to cramp dangerously while swimming. The mechanism sounds plausible. In practice, it does not hold up. While blood flow does increase toward the gut following a meal, the body maintains sufficient circulation to working muscles simultaneously. Human circulation is not a zero-sum system where digestion shuts down physical performance. Minor cramps from vigorous swimming on a very full stomach are possible and uncomfortable, but they are not a documented drowning risk in healthy individuals. The actual primary risk factors for drowning are alcohol consumption, inability to swim, absence of supervision, and physical exhaustion. None of those were mentioned in their health class. The rule kept children sitting on towels, staring at the pool for half an hour based on physiology that does not work the way the rule assumes. The sandwich was never the threat. The coworker who cannonballed 3 seconds after finishing lunch is statistically fine. 11. Finish all your antibiotics, even when you feel completely recovered, or you are personally responsible for the next generation of antibiotic-resistant superbugs. This was delivered as medical doctrine and repeated by every pharmacist, doctor, and health teacher for decades. The medical community is actively revising this rule. The always finish the course instruction traces back to Alexander Fleming's Nobel Prize acceptance speech in 1945, where he warned that underdosing penicillin could encourage bacterial resistance. He was warning about taking too little medication, not about stopping when you are clinically resolved. A 2017 review in the British Medical Journal, signed by 10 infectious disease experts, argued that the evidence for always completing courses is weak and that unnecessarily prolonged antibiotic exposure destroys beneficial gut bacteria and increases selection pressure for resistance. Many modern clinical guidelines have shifted towards symptom-guided or shorter fixed-course treatment for specific infections rather than arbitrary multi-week protocols. The nuance is real. Some conditions genuinely require full course completion, others do not. That distinction makes the blanket classroom rule a dangerous oversimplification of a complex clinical decision that requires knowing which infections you actually have. The warning was paraphrased from a Nobel acceptance speech, divorced from its original context, and became an absolute law of medicine. Fleming was warning about taking too little, not about stopping when the job was done. 12. Every classroom had a knuckle cracker and every teacher had the same pronouncement. Keep doing that and you will have arthritic hands before you are 40. The specific warning carried the confidence of someone who had seen this happen, which makes it notable that decades of research have found no link between knuckle cracking and arthritis. A physician named Donald Unger cracked the knuckles of his left hand every day for 60 years while leaving his right hand completely alone as a control. He found no difference in arthritis development between the two hands and was awarded the Ig Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2009 for the effort. The popping sound itself is caused by the rapid collapse of gas bubbles, primarily carbon dioxide, in the synovial fluid surrounding the joint, a process called tribonucleation. Some research does show mild, temporary swelling and marginally reduced grip strength in very long-term habitual crackers, but nothing approaching clinical arthritis. Osteoarthritis develops from cartilage wear, genetic predisposition, prior joint injury, and the accumulation of time, not from an audible pop. A doctor cracked one hand for 60 years and nothing happened. The rule was enforced by teachers who were annoyed by the sound and needed a consequence that sounded medical enough to stick. It stuck for generations. 13. See, hear, smell, taste, touch. The famous 5, listed on worksheets and memorized for assessments as though the human body took inventory, filed the paperwork, and closed the case at 5. Humans have far more than 5 senses. Depending on how you define and categorize sensory systems, the actual count sits somewhere between 9 and 21. Proprioception is your sense of where your body parts are in space without looking. Remove it and you cannot walk, reach, or touch your own face with your eyes closed. The vestibular system detects balance and spatial orientation through the inner ear's semicircular canals and operates entirely separately from hearing despite sharing the same anatomical neighborhood. Interoception monitors internal body signals including hunger, thirst, pain, heart rate, breathing effort, and temperature regulation. A continuous stream of information that never reaches conscious awareness but keeps you alive regardless. Additional sensory systems include thermoception for detecting temperature gradients, nociception for pain as a distinct sensory category from touch, and chemoreceptors monitoring blood oxygen and carbon dioxide levels. All of these are operating right now without requiring any conscious attention from you. The 5-sense model comes from Aristotle, who constructed it around 350 BC without access to neurology, anatomy imaging, or any measurement tool more sophisticated than observation. Your health class was grading you on ancient Greek philosophy and calling it biology. 14, hand on heart, left side, the Pledge of Allegiance, the romantic gesture, the anatomical fact everyone knows without being taught. The heart is not on the left side. It sits in the center of the chest in the compartment between the two lungs, slightly tilted so its lower tip, called the apex, points toward the lower left. That is where you feel the strongest beat. That is not where the organ lives. The bulk and base of the heart sit directly behind the sternum, which is why CPR compression guidelines specifically instruct rescuers to press the center of the chest, not the left side. Pressing the left side in an emergency based on classroom anatomy is pressing the wrong location. Only the apex is meaningfully left of center. The rare condition called dextrocardia, in which the heart is genuinely positioned on the right, affects approximately 1 in 12,000 people, confirming that even the left orientation is not biologically fixed as an absolute rule. The visual confusion is understandable since the apex is the most palpable and dramatic point of the heartbeat, but palpable location and anatomical center are different facts that health class collapsed into one. You have been placing your hand on the wrong side for every ceremonial moment and every slow dance. The strongest beat is left of center, the heart itself is in the middle, and it has been there the entire time. 15, shave once, and you are committed to a lifetime of thicker, darker, faster growing hair. The soft, fine version is gone, and you can never go back. Health class and every older relative confirmed it. Shaving has no effect on hair thickness, color, or growth rate, and this has been studied and confirmed since the 1920s. A 1928 clinical study by researcher Mildred Trotter specifically examined hair regrowth following shaving and found no change in pigmentation, diameter, or rate of growth. The illusion arises from basic geometry. A razor cuts hair to a blunt, flat cross-section rather than the natural tapered, fine tip that grows out of the follicle. That blunt stub feels coarser against your fingers and appears darker at its cut edge because you are looking at the full pigmented width of the hair shaft rather than the tapered, translucent tip. Hair color, thickness, and follicle behavior are determined by genetics and hormonal signals. The follicle producing the hair is located beneath the skin surface and is entirely unaffected by what you do to the shaft above it. Hormonal changes during adolescence naturally increase body hair density and pigmentation. At exactly the same time, most people start shaving, creating a false story of cause and effect that the timing makes extremely convincing. The razor touches dead tissue above the skin. The follicle doing all the actual work never notices. You cannot change the root by trimming the branch. 16. Beach emergency protocol, widely known and widely practiced. Get stung by a jellyfish, find a willing friend, and deploy urine immediately. Sold as applied chemistry, practiced on shorelines across the world. Urine can actually trigger the jellyfish's remaining stinging cells to fire additional venom, making the situation measurably worse than before the treatment started. Jellyfish tentacles contain structures called nematocysts, microscopic coiled harpoon-like cells that remain on the skin after contact and can continue discharging venom when stimulated by chemical or osmotic changes in their environment. Urine contains fresh water, which alters the salt balance around those nematocysts, potentially triggering a second round of venom discharge at exactly the moment you are trying to neutralize the first round. The correct first aid is to rinse with seawater, not fresh water, carefully remove visible tentacles without rubbing the skin, and apply vinegar where specifically appropriate. The vinegar guidance itself is species dependent. It works well for certain jellyfish and can worsen stings from other species. Meaning the universal urine remedy is doubly wrong because it pretends one solution applies to all jellyfish in all oceans at all times. The actual treatment is vinegar and seawater. Both cost essentially nothing. The alternative requires a friend willing to do something deeply strange to you while you are already in pain, and it makes everything worse. 17. Every geography lesson included it as proof of human achievement on a cosmic scale, a structure so immense, so relentless in its length, that astronauts can see it with the naked eye from orbit. The claim is geometrically impossible under standard visual conditions, and astronauts have confirmed they cannot see it. The Great Wall averages roughly 4 to 5 meters wide. At low Earth orbit, approximately 400 kilometers altitude, resolving an object that narrow with the naked eye would require visual acuity roughly 7.5 times greater than perfect 20/20 human vision. That is not a rounding error. It is a fundamental mismatch between the size of the object and the physical limits of human eyesight at that distance. Chinese astronaut Yang Liwei specifically looked for the wall during his 2003 spaceflight, given its obvious national cultural significance, and could not see it. Some astronauts have reported detecting it under exceptional conditions using cameras or optical aids, but not with the naked eye under standard visibility. Roads and rivers are far more visible from orbit than the wall because their contrast ratio against surrounding terrain is dramatically higher. But that observation does not make the inspirational shortlist. This one slipped into health and science classes as a motivational fun fact about human scale. It is not a fact. It is a measurement error with exceptional branding. 18. Wet hair in winter, bare feet on a cold floor, going outside without a jacket. Every teacher and every grandparent agreed that thermal exposure causes illness. You cannot get sick from cold temperatures alone. The common cold requires a virus. You need to be exposed to one of over 200 different viral strains, predominantly rhinoviruses, before any illness is possible. Temperature is not a pathogen. The reason cold weather illness rates climb in winter comes down to behavior, not biology. People spend more time indoors in close proximity in poorly ventilated spaces with recirculated air, which creates ideal conditions for respiratory virus transmission between people who are physically near each other for extended periods. Some research does indicate that rhinoviruses replicate slightly more efficiently at the cooler temperatures found in the nasal passages during cold air breathing, approximately 33 degrees Celsius versus the body's core temperature of 37 degrees, which gives the myth a marginal biological kernel. But the virus still has to be present in the first place. Historical accounts of explorers in extreme Arctic conditions, isolated from other humans, rarely report colds, consistent with exposure, not temperature, as the actual mechanism. You need a virus to get a cold. The cold air is the interior decoration of the room where the virus finds you. The person who came into work sick in January is the problem. January itself is not. 19. The evolutionary diagram, a procession from crouching ape to upright modern human, a straight march of improvement that ended with us. Health class taught it as a linear progression with chimpanzees as the precursor step that humans graduated from. Humans did not evolve from chimpanzees. Humans and chimpanzees share a common ancestor that no longer exists. The last shared ancestor of the human and chimpanzee lineages lived approximately 6 to 7 million years ago. It was neither a modern human nor a modern chimpanzee, but an earlier primate form from which both lineages diverged along separate evolutionary paths over millions of years. Modern chimps and modern humans are both end products of those branching paths. Evolutionary cousins, not parent and child. The famous March of Progress illustration, originally published in 1965 in a Time Life educational series, depicted evolution as a single straight line, which is not how branching evolutionary trees work and which has caused persistent public misunderstanding of the concept for 6 decades. Humans share approximately 98.7% of their DNA with chimpanzees, which is striking, but humans also share roughly 85% of their DNA with mice and around 60% with fruit flies. Genetic similarity tells the story of shared ancestry, not direct descent. Saying humans evolved from chimps is biologically equivalent to saying you are descended from your cousin because you share grandparents. The grandparents existed. The lineage did not work the way the diagram showed. 20. The appendix was the biology classroom's favorite example of evolutionary irrelevance. A pointless tube that serves no purpose occasionally ruptures to remind you it exists and is best removed when the opportunity arises. The appendix has an identified immune function and appears to serve as a reservoir for beneficial gut bacteria, which changes the entire framing. The appendix contains significant lymphoid tissue and is classified as part of the gut-associated lymphoid tissue system, which plays a role in immune response during early life development. Research published in 2007 by surgeons at Duke University proposed that the appendix functions as a protected reservoir for beneficial gut microbiome bacteria, providing a biological safe house for repopulating the intestinal flora following severe illness that wipes out the gut's bacterial population. People who have had appendectomies show modestly higher rates of Clostridioides difficile infection, a serious bacterial gut infection, an outcome consistent with the safe house hypothesis. The concept of vestigial meaning useless is itself an outdated interpretation. Vestigial means reduced from an ancestral form. It does not mean functionless. The organ your health teacher told you does nothing. Turns out to store backup copies of your gut's working population. It is essentially a biological recovery drive. Your teacher told you it was a glitch in the code. The research says otherwise. 21 A, B, AB, O. 4 blood types, clean categories, a simple system memorized for assessments and printed on medical ID bracelets. The ABO system is one of over 40 recognized blood group systems. Human blood typing is far more complex than the 4-type classroom model suggests, and the simplification has real medical consequences. The International Society of Blood Transfusion currently recognizes 43 distinct blood group systems, including the RH system that adds positive or negative to the ABO types, along with the Kell system, Duffy, KID, MNS, and many others, each representing different antigens present on the surface of red blood cells. When all recognized blood group antigens are combined, there are theoretically millions of unique possible blood type combinations in the human population. The ABO system is medically dominant in basic transfusion practice because ABO incompatibility triggers the most severe and immediate reactions, making it the most critical factor to match in emergency situations. It is not the only system that matters in complex transfusions, bone marrow transplants, or repeated transfusion scenarios. Rare blood types like Rh null, sometimes called golden blood, are so uncommon that fewer than 50 people worldwide are known to carry them, creating serious medical challenges for those individuals if they ever require transfused blood. The 4 blood types are the version simplified enough to fit on a single worksheet. The actual system is a layered biological identification code, and the worksheet only covers the first line. 22. Once struck by lightning, forever protected. The folk wisdom and the classroom science fact, delivered as both meteorological and philosophical truth. Lightning strikes the same location repeatedly, often within the same storm, and does so for straightforward physical reasons that make the myth particularly backwards. Lightning follows the path of least electrical resistance between a charged cloud and the ground. If a specific location provides an efficient conduction path, a tall structure, an isolated tree, a radio tower, it will attract repeated strikes for the same physical reason every time the conditions are met. The Empire State Building is struck by lightning approximately 20 to 25 times per year, and during severe electrical storms, it can be struck multiple times within a single hour. The myth persisted partly because the first documented strike at any location is the memorable event, while subsequent strikes go unnoticed or unreported. A United States park ranger named Roy Sullivan was struck by lightning 7 separate times over the course of his career. The most verified lightning strikes survived by a single individual in documented history, making him the biographical refutation of the entire concept. The entire claim is not just wrong, it is directionally reversed. If lightning found a conduction path once, the physical conditions that created that path still exist. The strike is not protection, it is a track record of vulnerability. 23. You are either a logical left brain thinker or a creative right brain person. A personality fact delivered in classrooms and confirmed by workplace seminars, team building exercises, and an entire industry of self-assessment tools. The left brain, right brain personality framework is not supported by neuroscience. Both hemispheres are involved in virtually all cognitive tasks, continuously and simultaneously. A 2013 University of Utah study analyzed functional MRI data from over 1,000 participants and found no evidence that individuals preferentially use one hemisphere over the other in ways that map onto logical or creative personality categories. The hemispheres do have genuine functional tendencies. Language processing is more left dominant in most right-handed people, and certain spatial processing tasks show a right hemisphere bias. But these are statistical tendencies across populations, not fixed personality categories defining individual identity. The two hemispheres are connected by the corpus callosum, a thick band of neural fibers that continuously integrates information between both sides during essentially all thought processes. The myth gained widespread traction from misinterpretations of split brain research conducted in the 1960s on patients whose corpus callosum had been surgically severed as a treatment for severe epilepsy. That is an unusual surgical procedure performed on people with a serious neurological condition. It is not a model for how a standard brain works. The entire personality industry was reverse engineered from studying surgically disconnected brains, then sold to everyone else as a self-discovery tool. 24, goldfish get a 3-second memory window and then start fresh. A factoid that made generations of people comfortable with the quality of life they were providing a living animal. Goldfish have demonstrated memory retention spanning months, and the 3-second claim has no documented scientific origin anywhere in the research literature. Researchers at the Technion Institute in Israel trained goldfish to press a lever for food at specific times of day and demonstrated that the fish retained the behavior reliably over extended periods, showing time-based memory that operates on a scale of days, not seconds. A Plymouth University study trained goldfish to navigate a maze, pull a lever, and recognize specific visual cues. Behaviors that require sustained memory formation and learning capacity, not a nervous system that resets every 3 seconds. Goldfish can be conditioned to associate specific sounds or visual signals with feeding times and show clear anticipatory behavior days or weeks after the initial training, meaning they remember what the signal means and what it predicts. The myth likely persisted partly because it reduces the psychological discomfort of keeping a demonstrably responsive animal in a small, barren, unstimulating container. If it forgets everything instantly, the environment does not matter. The goldfish remembered. It just could not tell you, and you chose the version of the story that was more convenient. That version was not the accurate one. 25. Eat your carrots. They are good for your eyes. Delivered at every dinner table and in every health class with complete confidence, as though a vegetable were a corrective lens in root form. Carrots will not improve the eyesight of a well-nourished person, and the origin of the myth is not nutritional science. It is wartime military intelligence. During the Second World War, the British Royal Air Force developed radar technology that dramatically improved their ability to intercept enemy aircraft at night. To conceal the existence of that technology from adversaries, British intelligence planted news stories crediting pilot accuracy to a carrot-heavy diet. A deliberate, structured disinformation campaign that worked on multiple audiences simultaneously. The nutritional kernel inside the myth is real but limited. Vitamin A, which the body converts from beta-carotene, found in carrots, is essential for producing rhodopsin, the photoreceptor pigment needed for low-light vision. Deficiency causes night blindness. Adequate intake prevents it. Intake beyond adequacy does nothing further. In populations where vitamin A deficiency is genuinely common, supplementation restores normal vision, producing real evidence that was then overgeneralized to well-nourished populations where the deficiency does not exist. The myth survived because it contains a biological truth that applies only to a specific deficiency state in a specific population. A wartime lie invented to protect classified radar technology became your health teacher's nutrition lesson. The German military was not the only audience that believed it. 26 tool use was presented as the line between us and everything else, the defining characteristic of human intelligence that placed us categorically above the rest of the animal kingdom, confirmed by biology and reinforced by the food chain diagram. Dozens of animal species use tools, including insects. The line does not exist where it was drawn. Chimpanzees use sticks to extract insects from mounds, select stones to crack open hard nuts, and fashion leaves into sponges to collect water. Behaviors documented beginning in the 1960s by Jane Goodall and fieldwork that genuinely surprised the scientific establishment. New Caledonian crows not only use tools but manufacture them, bending wire into hooks and constructing multi-step compound tools, behaviors involving planning across time and demonstrating levels of problem solving that were previously considered exclusive to humans. Bottlenose dolphins in a specific bay in Western Australia have been observed using marine sponges strapped to their snouts to stir the seafloor while foraging, protecting themselves from abrasion. This behavior is culturally transmitted, passed from mothers to offspring across generations. Certain wasp species use pebbles to compact their burrow entrances, and sea otters select and carry preferred stones for cracking shellfish, storing the stones in a skin pouch under one arm between uses. The classroom drew a clear line between humans and animals at tool use. A chimpanzee erased that line in 1960 by poking a stick into a termite mound and pulling out lunch. 27. Eat alkaline foods, shift your body's pH, optimize your internal chemistry. Delivered in wellness spaces with health class adjacent language, just credible enough to be convincing. Your body regulates blood pH within an extremely narrow range of 7.35 to 7.45 through mechanisms that dietary choices cannot override in a healthy person. Blood pH is maintained through three simultaneous systems: the bicarbonate buffer system, operating in the blood itself; respiratory compensation, where breathing rate is adjusted to release or retain carbon dioxide; and renal compensation, where the kidneys modulate the excretion of bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. If blood pH drops below 7.35, the result is acidosis, a medical emergency. If it rises above 7.45, the result is alkalosis, also a medical emergency. Neither condition is treated with dietary adjustment, they are treated in intensive care. The confusion arises because urine pH does change in response to diet, producing measurable results that proponents interpret as evidence the body is becoming more alkaline. That urine pH change is not the body shifting. It is the kidneys actively working to maintain blood pH homeostasis by excreting the excess, the opposite of the body surrendering to dietary influence. Food provides genuine health benefits through fiber, micronutrients, and anti-inflammatory compounds, not through pH manipulation. If you could eat your way to a different blood pH, you would already be in a hospital. Your kidneys are doing the actual work and are not taking dietary suggestions. 28. Your dominant hand reveals your dominant brain hemisphere, which reveals your cognitive personality type. A tidy, learnable system that connected handedness, brain structure, and identity into one teachable framework. The relationship between handedness and hemispheric function is real, but far more nuanced than the classroom version, and neither predicts the personality categories that were built on top of them. Approximately 90% of right-handed people have left hemisphere dominance for language processing. However, roughly 70% of left-handed people also have left hemisphere language dominance, which means handedness alone is not a reliable predictor of lateralization. The remaining variation in left-handers includes some with right hemisphere language dominance, and roughly 1% with bilateral language processing distributed across both hemispheres. Handedness itself is influenced by a complex mixture of genetic factors estimated at approximately 25% heritability, prenatal environment, and early developmental conditions, and does not cleanly sort people into behavioral or cognitive categories. Historically, schools in many countries forced left-handed children to switch to writing with the right hand, a practice that caused significant anxiety and in some cases contributed to speech disruptions. Evidence of genuine neurological integration between handedness and language circuits, but not the pop psychology personality categories the framework promised. The hand you write with tells neuroscience something statistically interesting about populations. It tells you nothing clinically meaningful about whether you are logical or creative, and it never did. 29. The antibacterial label implied superiority. Same task, better outcome, the obviously correct choice for anyone who took hygiene seriously. The United States Food and Drug Administration ruled in 2016 that antibacterial soap is not more effective than plain soap and water for routine use and banned 19 common antibacterial ingredients from consumer products. Triclosan, the primary antibacterial ingredient in most consumer soaps at the time, was found to provide no additional benefit over regular soap in reducing illness or infection rates under normal household conditions. The key mechanism in effective hand washing is not chemical. It is mechanical. The friction, lather, and rinsing action physically dislodges and removes pathogens from skin surfaces, carrying them down the drain. Antibacterial chemical agents are largely redundant in this context because the physical removal happens first and does most of the work. The FDA review also raised concerns that widespread triclosan use was potentially contributing to antibiotic-resistant bacterial strains through repeated low-level exposure. And animal studies identified possible disruption of thyroid hormone regulation. The ban applied specifically to leave-on or short-contact consumer products. Medical-grade surgical antiseptics operate under different conditions with different contact times and different evidence bases. Those remain valid. But the antibacterial soap you paid a premium for at the pharmacy was not performing the additional function the label implied. Regular soap was the complete answer. It always was. 30. You are an introvert or an extrovert, a binary classification taught as psychological fact, reinforced by classroom exercises and treated as a fixed, measurable feature of your neurological wiring. Introversion and extroversion exist on a continuous spectrum, and the majority of people fall somewhere in the middle. Carl Jung, who introduced the terms in 1921, explicitly described them as tendencies on a continuum, not categorical boxes. He also stated directly that no pure introvert or extrovert exists in practice, and that such a person would be in a mental institution, a qualification that did not survive the journey into classroom personality worksheets. The Myers-Briggs type indicator, which enforces a hard binary introvert or an extrovert classification, has been consistently criticized by personality psychologists for poor test-retest reliability. Studies show that people score differently when retested at rates approaching 50%, meaning you might be classified as an introvert on Tuesday and an extrovert on Saturday using the same instrument. The Big Five personality model, the most empirically validated personality framework in the academic literature, treats extroversion as a continuous dimension with most people clustering toward the center. A pattern researchers call ambiversion. Neurological studies attempting to identify clear anatomical or functional brain differences between introverts and extroverts have not produced consistent, replicable findings that support the binary. Jung invented a spectrum. Classrooms turned it into a two-checkbox test. Most people were always somewhere in the middle. 31. You are a visual learner, an auditory learner, or a kinesthetic learner, and instruction delivered in your preferred modality will improve your learning outcomes. This was taught as cognitive science, incorporated into teacher training, and used to design educational materials for decades. The learning styles hypothesis has been extensively tested and has consistently failed to find evidence that matching instruction to self-reported style preference improves outcomes. A 2018 review by the Association for Psychological Science concluded that there is no adequate evidence base to justify incorporating learning styles assessments into general educational practice. A direct statement from the scientific body representing the field. The hypothesis requires a specific pattern to hold. Visual learners should perform meaningfully better with visual instruction and meaningfully worse with auditory instruction. Studies testing this crossover interaction, the actual prediction the theory makes, rarely find it. Despite the scientific consensus, surveys consistently show that over 90% of teachers in many countries continue to believe in learning styles, making it one of the most entrenched neuromyths in education systems globally. The most robust finding in decades of educational research is that all learners benefit from multimodal instruction, varied repetition, spaced practice, and retrieval-based learning, regardless of any self-reported style preference. Everyone learns better when teaching is good. That is the finding. It was always the finding, and the learning styles framework was consuming planning time that could have been spent on methods that actually work. 32. The neurons you are born with are the ones you keep, a fixed, gradually declining resource. Damage them, and they are gone. Health class taught this as settled neuroscience, and the implication was that the adult brain is a closed system running on whatever it started with. The brain can generate new neurons in adulthood through a process called neurogenesis, and this finding overturned one of the most confident assumptions in mid-century neuroscience. Adult neurogenesis was convincingly demonstrated in mammals in the 1990s by researchers including Fred Gage at the Salk Institute, who showed new neurons forming in the hippocampus of adult humans, a region critical for learning and memory formation. Exercise, particularly sustained aerobic activity, consistently increases production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that supports neurogenesis, and has been shown across multiple studies to increase hippocampal volume in adults. The olfactory bulb is another documented site of ongoing neurogenesis in adult mammals. The field remains active and contested. Some more recent studies using refined tissue analysis have questioned the scale of adult neurogenesis in humans, and the exact clinical significance continues to be debated. What is not debated is that the concept of a completely static adult brain producing zero new neurons under any condition has been firmly abandoned by modern neuroscience. Health class told you the brain was a fixed account with no deposits possible. The actual picture is a system that is still under construction in ways we are still measuring. 33. You eat, it goes to the stomach digests it. The organ presented as the central engine of the entire digestive operation. Most nutrient absorption happens in the small intestine. The stomach is primarily a holding and initial processing chamber, not the destination. The stomach's actual functions are mechanical churning to break food into smaller particles, controlled release of that material into the small intestine at a regulated pace, and chemical processing through hydrochloric acid and the enzyme pepsin, which begins protein breakdown. Approximately 90% of actual nutrient absorption, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, vitamins, and minerals, occurs across the 6 meters of small intestine via specialized absorptive cells called enterocytes. The small intestine's internal surface area is dramatically increased by finger-like projections called villi and their microscopic extensions called microvilli, together forming the brush border. The effective absorptive surface area created by these structures is estimated at approximately 250 square meters, roughly the size of a tennis court, folded entirely within the abdominal cavity. The large intestine follows, primarily absorbing water and electrolytes while housing the gut microbiome, which performs additional fermentation and produces certain B vitamins and vitamin K. The stomach is the reception desk. It checks material in, performs some initial processing, and passes it to where the actual absorption work happens. The small intestine is the entire operation. Nobody in health class used its name with the same energy as the organ that occasionally makes noise after lunch. 34. At the first sign of illness, megadose vitamin C. Take extra at the start of cold season. Take more when symptoms appear. Linus Pauling said so, and he had 2 Nobel Prizes, so the logic was hard to argue with in a classroom setting. Large-scale systematic reviews show vitamin C does not prevent colds in the general population and reduces duration only modestly by roughly half a day in adults at very high supplemental doses. A 2013 Cochrane review analyzing 29 controlled trials involving over 11,000 participants found that regular vitamin C supplementation had no effect on cold incidence in the general public. Adults showed approximately an 8% reduction in cold duration. Children showed approximately 14%. The findings for prevention were clear: no benefit for the average person taking supplements routinely. There is a genuine exception. People undergoing extreme physical stress, including marathon runners and soldiers training in Arctic conditions, showed some preventive benefit from supplementation, consistent with the idea that the effect matters primarily when intake is genuinely depleted by exceptional physical demands. The vitamin C mythology traces substantially to Linus Pauling's 1970 book claiming megadoses prevented colds. Pauling won his prizes in chemistry and peace. This specific work was not representative of his most rigorous science and was not borne out by subsequent controlled research. Vitamin C above approximately 2,000 milligrams daily is simply excreted. The half-day cold reduction is a real finding. The cure was never real. 35. Every cell in your body is replaced every 7 years. A comforting, philosophical, biologically grounded fact that implies periodic renewal and a kind of cellular fresh start. Different cell types have dramatically different lifespans that range from days to an entire human lifetime. The 7-year average masks biological variation so extreme that the average becomes nearly meaningless as a description of any actual tissue. Red blood cells survive approximately 120 days. The cells lining the gut are replaced every 3 to 5 days. Liver cells turn over on a cycle of roughly 150 to 500 days. Skin cells regenerate approximately every 2 to 4 weeks. Neurons in the cerebral cortex, the region associated with higher thinking, reasoning, and memory, are generated during prenatal development and largely persist for the entire human lifespan, meaning you are, in a meaningful sense, thinking with the same neurons you were born with. Cells in the lens of the eye and the enamel of teeth are essentially never replaced, making them literally as old as the person carrying them. Precise measurement of cell age using atmospheric radiocarbon as a biological timestamp, work conducted by Jonas Friesen at Sweden's Karolinska Institute, provided the empirical foundation for understanding how profoundly different cell lifespans are across tissue types. Your gut lining is newer than your phone. Your cortical neurons are older than everything you own. The 7-year reset applies to an average that does not describe any single tissue in your body. 36. The vast majority of the human genome was classified as junk. Evolutionary leftover with no function, biological noise accumulated over millions of years of imprecise copying. The junk DNA framework has been substantially revised, and large portions of non-coding genetic material perform regulatory and structural functions that are far from useless. The ENCODE project, the Encyclopedia of DNA Elements, an international research consortium that published major findings in 2012, reported that approximately 80% of the human genome shows at least some biochemical activity, including regulatory functions. Non-coding regions include promoters and enhancers that control when protein coding genes are activated and how much protein is produced. Effectively, the instructions for reading the instructions, operating the gene expression machinery, rather than being the primary code themselves. Some non-coding DNA encodes regulatory RNA molecules including microRNAs and long non-coding RNAs, which play documented roles in gene expression, cellular development, and disease processes, including cancer. The term junk DNA was coined in 1972 by geneticist Susumu Ono, and while it was a functional placeholder for sequences whose purpose was not yet understood, it calcified from a working hypothesis into a stated fact in educational settings long after the research had moved past it. Calling the majority of the genome junk because we had not yet identified its function is equivalent to calling the operating system of a computer useless because it is invisible from the desktop. The genome is running processes we did not know to look for. 37. Swallow gum, and it stays in your stomach for 7 years. A rule delivered with the conviction of gastrointestinal fact, designed to stop children from swallowing gum and remarkably effective at its actual purpose. Gum is not digested, but it does not remain in the stomach for 7 years. It passes through the digestive tract and is excreted in the normal way that indigestible material is handled. The gum base, the synthetic portion that gives gum its texture and elasticity, is not broken down by digestive enzymes, because it contains polymers and resins the gut cannot metabolize. However, indigestible does not mean stationary. The gastrointestinal tract moves all contents through mechanical muscle contractions called peristalsis, regardless of whether those contents can be chemically broken down. Indigestible fiber, certain plant cell wall components, and various other non-digestible materials pass through the same way, on a timeline measured in hours to days. In extremely rare documented cases, typically involving very young children swallowing unusually large quantities of gum repeatedly over a short period, compacted masses called bezoars have formed and required medical attention. These are case reports, not common outcomes, and they bear essentially no resemblance to the 7-year retention claim. Pediatric gastroenterologists note that making a habit of swallowing gum, particularly for young children, is not advisable, but that occasional swallowing poses no clinically meaningful risk. Your intestines have been moving things they cannot digest for your entire life. The gum was out within days. The rule lasted decades. 38, a premium price on a supplement signals premium quality and premium efficacy. A reasonable inference if supplements are regulated like pharmaceuticals, which they are not. The dietary supplement industry in the United States operates under dramatically weaker regulatory standards than medications, and price is not a validated indicator of product quality or effectiveness. Under the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994, manufacturers are not required to prove safety or efficacy before bringing products to market. The burden of proof runs in reverse compared to pharmaceuticals. The FDA can only act after a product has already been shown to cause harm. Third-party testing organizations including the United States Pharmacopeia, NSF International, and independent consumer testing groups regularly find that supplements contain more or less of the labeled ingredient than stated, include contaminants not disclosed on the label, or fail to dissolve correctly in the body. A 2015 investigation by New York State's Attorney General found that 79% of herbal supplement products tested from major national retailers did not contain the primary ingredient listed on the label. Some supplements genuinely benefit specific populations with documented deficiencies, vitamin D, B12, folate, and iron among them. But this is independent of price and requires first establishing whether a deficiency actually exists. The supplement industry sells you a product category that does not have to prove it works before you pay for it. The most important step was asking a doctor whether you needed it in the first place. That step was never on the label. 39. Humans pair bond for life because we are biologically monogamous. Presented as a fact about our species, supported by evolution, confirmed by social structure, and reinforced by every family unit. Diagram health class ever drew on a whiteboard. Human mating systems are complex, variable across cultures, and do not map onto strict biological monogamy by the standards used in animal behavioral science. In anthropology, true biological monogamy requires both social fidelity and genetic fidelity. Genetic studies consistently find that between 1 and 10% of children in self-described monogamous relationships were fathered by someone other than the social partner, a result measured across dozens of separate cultures and populations. Across approximately 1,200 human societies documented in the standard cross-cultural sample, roughly 83% permit some form of polygamy, predominantly polygyny, though most individual marriages within those societies function as practically monogamous for logistical and economic reasons. Biologically, human males show moderate testis size relative to body weight, intermediate between highly polygamous species and genuinely monogamous ones. A physical indicator suggesting our evolutionary history reflects pressure from a mixed mating system rather than strict monogamy. Social monogamy and genetic monogamy are distinct categories that do not consistently align. Many species that appear socially monogamous are genetically polygamous, and the distinction matters enormously when making claims about what is natural. Presenting human mating as clean biological monogamy required simultaneously ignoring comparative anthropology, behavioral genetics, and primate behavioral science. Health class resolved that conflict by not mentioning any of them. 40. Juice cleanses, detox teas, specialized dietary protocols, delivered with health class adjacent vocabulary, just credible enough to sound scientific. Toxins build up in the body, cleanses remove them, and the process restores function. In clinical medicine, the word toxin refers to a specific measurable chemical compound with a known mechanism of harm. In the detox industry, it refers to nothing specific. The liver filters the blood continuously, processing metabolic byproducts, environmental compounds, medications, and biological waste through enzymatic pathways, primarily through the cytochrome P450 enzyme family, before neutralizing them or packaging them for renal excretion. The kidneys filter approximately 180 liters of blood per day, removing waste products and excreting them in urine. This is ongoing, involuntary, and not meaningfully augmented by any commercial dietary protocol in a person with functioning organs. Academic reviews of detox diet research consistently find the same result. No peer-reviewed studies demonstrate that commercial cleanse products remove specific measurable toxins or improve organ function in otherwise healthy individuals. The word toxin is almost never defined with any chemical specificity by the people selling products to remove it. Actual clinical detoxification for alcohol dependency, drug overdose, or heavy metal poisoning is performed in medical settings using evidence-based protocols that look nothing like a juice cleanse. Your liver has been running a continuous industrial detoxification process since before you were born. The cleanse is not helping it. The cleanse is a marketing budget dressed in wellness language. 41, one piece of fruit, daily, a shield against all illness. Delivered as folk wisdom carrying the authority of medical advice and repeated in health classes as nutritional shorthand for the entire concept of preventive care. Eating apples does not demonstrably reduce physician visits, and the specific saying was not originally a health claim at all. The expression traces back to a 19th century Pembrokeshire proverb that read, "Eat an apple on going to bed, and you will keep the doctor from earning his bread." A recommendation about nighttime digestion, not disease prevention, that was simplified and repackaged over decades into its current form. A 2015 study published in JAMA Internal Medicine examined whether apple consumption was associated with fewer physician visits in a population study and found that daily apple eaters were not significantly less likely to visit a doctor compared to non-apple eaters, though they did use somewhat fewer prescription medications. Apples are genuinely nutritious. They provide dietary fiber, including pectin, which functions as a prebiotic, along with vitamin C, potassium, and polyphenol antioxidants. They are a good food. They are not uniquely or specifically protective in any clinically documented way compared to other fruits and vegetables consumed in reasonable quantities. The deeper problem is the single food health solution concept embedded in the proverb itself. Dietary health operates through patterns of eating across time, not the presence of a specific item on a specific day. The apple is fine. Your doctor's schedule has never actually been threatened by your produce choices. 42. The foundation of everything. The government-certified, scientifically designed visual guide to healthy eating that sat at the front of every health classroom and was tested on every nutrition exam. The original USDA food pyramid was significantly influenced by agricultural lobbying, contained recommendations that nutrition researchers publicly criticized as inconsistent with the available evidence, and has since been revised and replaced multiple times. The original 1992 pyramid recommended 6 to 11 daily servings of bread, cereal, rice, and pasta as its base. A recommendation that made no distinction between refined grains and whole grains, and which nutrition epidemiologists at Harvard publicly criticized as not supported by the evidence that existed at the time of publication. The USDA administers both national agricultural subsidies and dietary guidelines. A structural conflict of interest that researchers noted produced recommendations favoring high grain and high dairy consumption in ways that conveniently aligned with the economic interests of major subsidized agricultural sectors. Harvard's School of Public Health published its own alternative eating pyramid as an explicit correction, emphasizing whole grains, healthy fats, and reduced refined carbohydrate consumption, differing substantially from the federal version on multiple key points. The original pyramid was replaced in 2005 with a revised version, then replaced again in 2011 with the My Plate format. Each replacement acknowledged limitations of the previous version. The definitive nutritional authority you memorize for your health exam was drawn by an agency that also decides which farms receive federal subsidies. The pyramid was not purely science, it was agriculture policy with a triangle drawn around it, and you were graded on memorizing it. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.